Today on the channel, we're going to talk about how Pixar makes you cry. Let's get started. Why do we cry? You might say that we cry because we're sad. That's really only half the answer. Because we also cry when we're happy, mad, sad, when we're laughing super hard, and for a ton of other reasons. Crying has less to do with a single emotion and has more to do with the shock that we feel as human beings when our expectations of how things are come crashing into the realities of a situation. The best way for me to explain this is with the dodgeball analogy. And after all, who hasn't cried while playing dodgeball? According to the Calgary Sports Club, distraction or decoy ball is when your teammate throws a high lob to distract your opponent. Meanwhile, you throw a hard one at them. Now let's bring this back to storytelling and the masterful way in which Pixar makes you cry. In other words, crying happens when we're distracted by the high lob of expectations, only to be slammed by the hard ball of the reality. We might cry when we're sad because the expectations of ourselves are different than the reality of someone else. Someone comes up, says what their reality is, and the shock of it makes us cry. Humor exploits us all the time. The comedian will lead us down a long path of expectation only to hit us with a hilarious reality that is usually a little bit irreverent but shocks us and makes us cry from laughter. If you cry from anger, when you cry from anger, it's the same kind of shock. You might have a certain expectation about your spouse's fidelity, but when the reality of their infidelity comes into conflict with your expectations of fidelity, then the shock of it disarms you and makes you cry. Pixar has become a master at this. They lead their audience down a path of expectation only to shock them with reality. And that shock causes a certain amount of vulnerability and makes the audience cry. Let's look at some examples. Okay, the first example is the first 10 minutes of Up. If you haven't already, take a look at the YouTube channel Sideways. A link is in the description. He talks about how Pixar uses contrasting music to disarm the audience and make them cry. While I don't think this is the only tool in Pixar's arsenal, I do think it's a valuable way that Pixar, especially in the first 10 minutes of Up, a tool that Pixar uses to facilitate crying. Remember, crying happens when there's a feeling of shock because expectations and reality have crashed together. The first 10 minutes of the movie have the typical ups and downs of any happy relationship. There are some positives, some negatives, and it's also what you'd expect from any story. Ups, downs, climax. However, notice how the music is generally happy. This creates a certain expectation that while there are ups and downs, that the story will eventually end with an overall good, an overall happy. Cue the tears. Cue the tears. The music acts as a high lob of expectation, leading you down the path of carefree bliss. When BAM! Reality hits. Ellie's dead, Carl's alone. The shock of being confronted with such vulnerable realities make us cry. Our second example here is Coco. Coco arguably has the best music out of any Pixar movie. This is by design. It is about a boy who realizes his passion for music despite his parents' disapproval. Is it not? Unlike Up, Coco plays a long game with our expectations. Within the first 5 minutes of the movie, we're introduced to the famous musician Ernesto de la Cruz and his famous song, Remember Me. De la Cruz and Remember Me represent everything that Miguel loves about music. The fame, the passion, and frankly the raw sex appeal. Under these expectations of what music is and what it means, Miguel runs away from his family in order to pursue his passion and destiny for music. We carry these expectations throughout the entire movie, and these expectations are also reinforced by supplementary characters. And we believe these expectations all the way until the end of the movie when we're confronted with the reality of what the movie is trying to get across. His hero is a villain, and his great-great-grandfather is slowly fading away in the afterlife. In Miguel's frantic attempt not to lose his newfound great-great-grandfather, he rushes to his great-grandmother, his mama Coco, and sings Remember Me to her. It was never about fame or sex appeal. It was really just an intimate song between a father and his daughter that could really only be expressed through the power of family. The shock of expectation between the fame and passion and sex appeal of music and the power of familial love explodes in this scene when Miguel was singing to his mama Coco. We cried because the shock brought down our barriers, and we realized how vulnerable and relatable this is to us. Who of us hasn't wanted passion and fame and riches, only to realize that what was really important the whole time was family and the love of your family. Our third example in this video is Onward. If you haven't seen Onward, do it. It's a great movie, it has a great tearjerker. Also, I'm going to spoil the ending, so fair warning. The basic premise of Onward is that there's this young kid, Ian, who never really knew his dad. His dad died before he was born, and the only knowledge he has of his dad comes from his mother and especially his brother Barley. One day, through magical means, Ian finds out that there's a way for him to spend an entire day with his dad. But unfortunately, the magic got screwed up. Only literally half of his dad showed up. So Barley and Ian go off and try and fix the magic so that the day's not wasted and they can spend the entire day with their entire dad. So I mean, I tell you this and there's a clear expectation. We expect that by the end of the movie, Ian is gonna at least meet his dad and they're gonna share some intimate moments with each other, and ultimately Ian's gonna find purpose and be able to move on in his life with more confidence. Well, remember, these are the expectations. Well, by the end of the movie, clearly, crap hits the fan. Ian and Barley are engulfed in chaos, and there are only a few minutes left for them to fix the magic and spend just a few precious moments with their dad. And it gets to the point where only Ian or Barley can talk to the dad. And our expectation was that Ian was going to meet his dad finally, get to know him, and be able to move on with his life with purpose. However, we're slammed with a ball of reality where Ian tells Barley to go and talk to his dad. He does this because Barley's last moments with his dad were a little bit rocky, and it wasn't the way Barley wanted to end things. Expectation, Ian finally meets his dad. There's more purpose and more direction with his life, and he can move on with confidence. Ian realizes that he can never form a complete relationship with his dad in just a couple of minutes. But what he can do is let Barley go and talk to his dad and fix the last moments of their relationship. And what that leads to is, although Ian didn't get to meet his dad, he became like his dad because he selflessly allowed Barley to talk to his dad and fulfill something that was lacking. The sucker punch to our collective faces of Ian finally being able to meet his dad and the sucker punch of him not meeting his dad opened us up to the collective vulnerability that there are some things about childhood that we can never really fix, but Ian found peace with that, and maybe we can too. Conclusion. Okay, remember the dodgeball example. High lob of expectation, slam ball of reality. Throw a little sprinkle of truth bomb in there and your audience is gonna bawl like crazy. We cry when our expectations are different from realities and there's a shock between them colliding together. Pixar's pretty damn good at milking those tears. Learn from Pixar. Make someone cry today. See you next time.